Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. It all began on what should have been an ordinary autumn afternoon. But for me, it marked the anniversary of the day everything changed. I still remember the bittersweet moment when the truth shattered the life I thought I knew. I had just wrapped up a long morning of meetings and was looking forward to a quiet lunch break. A brief escape from the relentless grind of my financial consulting work. Driving through the bustling city streets, my mind wandered back to promises and vows that once seemed unbreakable. But as the red light ahead held me in place, a sight on the opposite side of the road pulled me into a surreal state of disbelief. There, parked without a care, was Aurelia's sleek, dark sedan. I couldn't believe my eyes. She was driving toward a modest hotel that I'd never even heard of until that fateful day. Something about that unexpected detour stirred a deep, gnawing doubt within me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a mix of apprehension and dread twisting in my gut. Without hesitation, I made a split-second decision to follow her discreetly, my heart pounding in my ears. I parked a few blocks away and sat hidden among the evening shadows, watching as her car slowly pulled into the hotel's parking lot. The sight of her stepping out of the car, her face illuminated briefly by the flickering street lamp, sent a jolt through me. Every detail, the determined set of her jaw, the secretive glance she cast around, spoke of hidden intentions. In that charged moment, I realized that the woman I had trusted with my life was leading a double existence. I remained a silent observer under the dim glow of a street lamp. From my vantage point, I watched Aurelia's car creep into the hotel's parking lot. The building, a nondescript structure with a worn sign reading "Shadow Inn," felt shrouded in secrecy. As she stepped out of her car, every movement felt deliberate, her eyes darting briefly as if she expected someone to be watching. Inside my car, I muttered under my breath, "This can't be real, can it?" My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it echoed in the quiet night. I forced myself to remain still, even as my mind churned with a mix of dread and a desperate need for answers. Aurelia walked briskly toward one of the side entrances. I strained to see the faint light spilling from behind a partially open door. For a long moment, I just sat there, paralyzed by disbelief. "What are you doing, Aurelia?" I thought, my inner voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. Minutes later, a soft murmur of conversation drifted from inside the hotel. Through the narrow gap in the curtains, I could just make out a brief exchange, a low, husky voice replying to hers. I couldn't catch every word, but the intimacy in their tones was unmistakable. My stomach churned as the reality of her betrayal hit me harder than I could have imagined. Then, just as quietly as she had entered, she emerged from the building. Her face was a mask of cool detachment, but the slump in her shoulders betrayed a secret weight. As I continued watching, a sleek, black Lexus pulled up behind her mere minutes later. A sharply dressed man stepped out, his expression a mixture of surprise and nonchalance as he approached her. I heard him say something softly, "Aurelia, we need to talk," before they quickly disappeared together into another entrance. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I tried to process the scene. "I have to know more," I whispered to myself, torn between the urge to confront her immediately and the need to collect undeniable evidence. I chose the latter. The silence of that night was broken only by my rapid breathing and the distant hum of the city. In that charged moment, every detail, her furtive glances, the subtle urgency in her stride, and the cool detachment in her farewell spoke volumes. I realized I was not just witnessing a betrayal. I was watching the final act of the life I thought we had built together. The silence in my car felt heavier than the night itself, and as the images replayed in my mind, I knew there was no turning back from what I had discovered. Later that night, I sat in the dim glow of my study, the events replaying in my mind like a relentless loop. I couldn't shake off the image of Aurelia's secretive arrival at the Shadow Inn and the mysterious man in the Lexus. The raw shock had simmered down to a cold, calculated fury. Determined not to be caught off guard again, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Scrolling through online news on my tablet, I was startled to see a local news alert about a bank robbery that had occurred earlier that day. The report included a grainy surveillance image of a woman wearing a mask, one whose build, posture, and even the subtle curve of her smile bore an uncanny resemblance to Aurelia's. I leaned forward, heart pounding, as I heard the newscaster's voice. Authorities are looking into a suspect described as similar in appearance to a local resident, noted for her distinctive features. Could it be? I murmured, my voice barely audible. My mind raced. I remembered every detail of the woman I had seen earlier, every furtive glance and every hesitant step. The pieces were starting to form a dangerous puzzle. Unable to contain my inner turmoil any longer, I picked up my phone and called the local precinct. When the officer answered, I said, "Good evening, Officer Daniels. I'd like to report something." This may sound far-fetched, but the description of the suspect in today's bank robbery bears a striking resemblance to a woman I know. I believe she was seen entering a nearby motel earlier. There was a pause on the line before Officer Daniels replied, "Sir, are you certain of what you're saying? This is a serious allegation." "I'm as certain as I can be," I insisted, my voice firm yet trembling with controlled anger. "I observed her entering the motel, and now I see her likeness on the news. I need to know what's really going on." As the conversation ended, a sense of grim determination settled over me. I wasn't confronting her directly. No, I had devised a more meticulous plan. By linking her actions to a criminal investigation, I could force Aurelia to reveal the truth. In my mind, this was not just about vindication. It was about reclaiming the control and dignity that had been stripped away from me. I imagined the moment when the police would eventually confront her, cornered by evidence she could no longer deny. In that scenario, her carefully constructed facade would crumble. I pictured her stammering excuses, the faltering rhythm of her lies caught in the stark light of interrogation. Meanwhile, the man from the Lexus, whom I would later learn was named Magnus, would face his own reckoning, though my primary target was always Aurelia. In that moment of calculated resolve, the room fell silent except for the steady hum of my thoughts. I had turned my pain into a weapon, channeling my anguish into a precise act of retribution. The plan was set. The wheels of fate were already in motion, and as I sat there, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The course of our lives was about to veer into uncharted territory, and I was ready to steer it toward justice. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. News of the bank robbery and the mysterious masked woman who bore an eerie resemblance to Aurelia spread like wildfire. By mid-morning, I could hear snippets of conversation at my office. Hushed tones, incredulous remarks, and barely concealed amusement. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, waiting for the inevitable call from the precinct. Came sooner than expected. Officer Daniels, his voice laced with cautious professionalism, informed me, "Mr. Quintus, we've located the suspect. She's being held for further questioning at the downtown station." My heart pounded, not from the shock of betrayal anymore, but from a cold, calculated satisfaction. I responded, "I'm glad to hear that, officer. I believe the truth will soon emerge." His pause was brief before he added, "We'll be in touch." Later that day, the precinct buzzed with activity. I overheard a conversation between two detectives in the corridor. "I can't believe how well she's been hiding her tracks. Her story just doesn't add up. It's like she was living a double life. Every detail we uncover only makes her more unbelievable." Their voices, tinged with a mixture of professional curiosity and personal disdain, validated my suspicions. Inside the interrogation room, the atmosphere was tense. Aurelia sat across from Detective Morales, her eyes darting around the sterile room, searching for a way out. Morales leaned forward, his tone firm yet not unkind. "Aurelia, we have evidence placing you at the scene of the robbery. You can either help us understand what happened or face the consequences of obstructing an investigation." Aurelia's response was a trembling mixture of denial and half-formed excuses. I don't know what you're talking about. I was just out for a walk, trying to clear my head." Her words fell flat against the weight of the mounting evidence. Detective Morales pressed on. Your car was seen at the Shadow Inn, and witnesses confirm you entered a room there. Then a man, identified as Magnus, was seen with you shortly after. How do you explain that? For a moment, I could almost hear the shattering of her carefully constructed facade. Aurelia's voice wavered, her words stumbling over themselves. I made a mistake, she finally admitted. The confession, a reluctant surrender to the undeniable truth. The room fell silent as the magnitude of her betrayal settled in, punctuated only by the scratch of a pen and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Outside the station, the scandal had taken on a life of its own. Friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances began discussing the incident openly. Social media was ablaze with memes and hashtags, reducing the complexities of our once private tragedy into a punchline that echoed through the city. I listened from afar, a bittersweet satisfaction mingling with a lingering sorrow. The man in the Lexus, Magnus, had his own share of ignominy, though his involvement was noted to be less than that of Aurelia. His actions had inadvertently corroborated the narrative I had hoped would emerge, a story of deceit and double standards. In a final twist, I received a discreet call from Officer Daniels later that evening. Mr. Quintus, he began, his tone slightly admonishing yet understanding. I must remind you that while our work is to uphold the law, your involvement in this matter is noted. We expect you to refrain from interfering further. I managed a short, measured reply. Understood, officer. I'm simply seeking the truth. Deep down, I knew that while the law might frown upon my methods, the outcome was a public unveiling of a betrayal that had long festered in the shadows. As the day drew to a close, I sat in the quiet of my study, the weight of the events pressing upon me. The public exposure of Aurelia's actions was complete, a spectacle that left her reputation in tatters and shattered the illusion of the life we once shared. In that charged silence, I could only reflect on the cost of truth and the bitter, yet oddly liberating power of justice served in the most unexpected ways. In the days that followed the scandal's public eruption, the unraveling of our once sacred bond accelerated with an almost clinical precision. The divorce proceedings began swiftly, fueled by the relentless media buzz and the murmurs of judgment that echoed in every corner of our community. One gray morning, I found myself seated in a stark, minimalist conference room at my attorney's office. Across from me sat Elena, my attorney, her tone both sympathetic and unyielding. Quintus, given the overwhelming evidence, Aurelia's case is compromised. The public sentiment isn't in her favor, and neither is the evidence, she explained, sliding a thick folder of documents across the table. I nodded silently, feeling a mix of vindication and a profound emptiness. The realization that the woman I once loved was now reduced to scandal was both a relief and a bitter reminder of lost trust. That afternoon, I passed by a coffee shop where regular patrons whispered and glanced furtively in my direction. I overheard a snippet of conversation. Did you hear? Aurelia's already been shunned by everyone. Even Magnus couldn't save her reputation. Their words stung like icy needles. I remembered the way she had smiled, once so genuine, now twisted into a mask of regret and embarrassment. At a final, emotionally charged meeting with Aurelia, the air was thick with unresolved tension. In a quiet corner of a nondescript diner, she met me with downcast eyes. Quintus, I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the words themselves could undo the damage. I replied, my tone measured yet laced with the weight of our shared past. Sorry doesn't change what happened, Aurelia. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to mend. There was a long silence between us, punctuated only by the clatter of cutlery and the murmurs of other diners. It was in that silence that I sensed the finality of our journey together. Meanwhile, the fallout was not confined to our personal realm. The community's reaction was an unrelenting reminder of the price of betrayal. Former friends of Aurelia distanced themselves, and those who once admired her now looked upon her with disdain. Social media erupted with harsh hashtags and snide comments, turning our private tragedy into a public spectacle. Even the legal proceedings carried an undercurrent of vindictive satisfaction. The judge, in a moment of unguarded amusement, remarked on the unexpected downfall of a once respected citizen. I could not help but reflect on Magnus, the man who had unwittingly added fuel to the fire. His involvement, though minor compared to Aurelia's deception, only amplified the narrative of double betrayal. Rumors swirled that even his own spouse had begun questioning his loyalty, leaving him as much a victim of scandal as a perpetrator of infidelity. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my study, reviewing the final settlement documents, I felt an odd mixture of liberation and sorrow. "It's over," I muttered to myself. Yet, the absence of Aurelia's presence left an aching void. Our lives were now irreparably divided, each of us destined to carry the scars of what had transpired. While the sting of betrayal cut deep, I understood that this painful chapter was necessary for rebuilding a life free of deceit. As the ink dried on the divorce papers, the final act of our shared tragedy came to a close. What was once a symbol of hope and promise had become a relic of a past marred by lies and humiliation. In that moment, as the weight of shattered trust settled around me like the evening dusk, I realized that even in our downfall, there lay the faint glimmer of a new beginning. A future where I might one day reclaim not only my identity but also the promise of redemption. A few months after the final decree was signed, I began to notice the faint stirrings of a new chapter in my life. It was a cool spring evening when I first encountered Verity at a small, eclectic art cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The soft murmur of conversation and the gentle clink of coffee cups provided a soothing backdrop as I nursed my favorite Americano, still haunted by memories of a painful past. Verity, with her keen hazel eyes and warm smile, approached the counter to place her order. Something about her presence exuded a resilience that resonated with me. "I couldn't help but notice you seem to appreciate the nuances of this place," she remarked, glancing in my direction as she waited. I managed a small nod and replied, "Yeah, I find comfort in familiar rhythms after a stormy season." Over the next few weeks, our casual conversations blossomed into long, reflective dialogues. One evening, as we strolled along the riverwalk beneath the softly lit skyline, Verity shared her own story. "I've been through my own betrayal," she confessed, her voice steady yet tinged with sorrow. "My ex shattered my trust in ways I never thought possible." Her words, raw and sincere, created an instant bond between us. "It sounds like we both learned the hard way," I said quietly. "But maybe these scars are paving the way for something better." We spent countless hours discussing our lives, our failures, and our hopes for the future. Verity introduced me to her passion for collecting rare, small-batch bourbon, a pursuit she found almost meditative. "Every sip reminds me that even the harshest flavors can evolve into something exquisite," she mused during one of our late-night tastings. I found solace in her optimism, a stark contrast to the bitterness of my recent past. In those moments, the memory of Aurelia and the dark chapter of betrayal began to recede, replaced by the gentle promise of renewal. "I never thought I'd find trust again," I admitted one quiet night over a glass of bourbon. "But being with you makes me believe that maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild something pure." Verity reached out, placing her hand over mine. "We can," she whispered. "One step at a time. Let's leave the ghosts of our past behind us." As spring gave way to summer, our bond deepened, not just through shared pain but through the realization that love, even after heartbreak, can be both fragile and resilient. I discovered that moving forward wasn't about erasing the past. It was about embracing the lessons it taught and using them to forge a better future. The city, with its vibrant pulse and endless opportunities, became a symbol of rebirth, a canvas on which I could finally paint a new beginning. In the quiet moments of introspection, as I sipped my bourbon and looked out over the city lights, I realized that this new journey was as much about self-discovery as it was about finding love again. The scars of betrayal would always remain, a reminder of a time when trust was lost. But now they served as the foundation for a stronger, wiser self. And as Verity and I continued to navigate the delicate dance of healing, I knew that this fresh start was not just an escape from the past. It was a deliberate, hopeful stride toward a future filled with promise. Stepping onto my porch, I glanced back at the wreckage of a once proud facade and murmured, "Enjoy your weekend in Seattle. The city shines even in its darkest hours." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.